Pulaski County Community Unit to order. Would everyone stand for the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America,
to
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right.
United States of
That's a shout out to our friend Samuel Everett.
Okay, could you give a roll call for attendance, please?
Yes. Mr. D'Angelo.
Here.
Spalding. Here. Mr. Goodson.
Here.
Mr. Hollowell.
I'm here.
Mr. Jackson.
Here.
Mr. Morgan. Soseki. Here. Ms. Sheehan.
Here.
Stern. Ms. Walteser. Mr. Holdworth.
Present.
Ms. Winters. Here. Mr. Wurs. Okay, we have a quorum of 9.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to announce that we did meet in executive session at 6:15 p.m. to discuss real estate matters. And I would also at this time like to announce a change in the order of the agenda. Before we move further, we would normally present presentations and mini reports, but we have a request to move the consent agenda up. And at that request, because one of our board members has to leave, I would like to have a motion to change the order of the agenda and allow us to next move directly to public comment and then move on to the consent agenda or discussion and voting. We'll then return to the presentation and mini reports followed by remaining non-voting items on the agenda. So could I get a motion to do that? So moves.
It was Miss Foley and Mr. Waldorf.
Thank you, Josh. Okay. All those in favor of changing the order of the agenda, moving to public comment and then voting items, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion to change the order of the agenda has been approved. We'll now move to public comment.
Before we do that, I understand from technology that Ms. Stern has joined. Ms. Stern, we just want to make sure that you can hear us, please, and that we can hear you.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. And so we will now move to public comment. Anyone from the public?
Karen reports no public comment.
Now, if there's no public, okay. So now the next item will be our consent agenda. And does anyone need anything on those items, which would be, I believe, 6A through 10K? Does anyone have any questions or concerns? I'll take that as a no.
Sure.
I can give them second motions, right?
You turn your mic on.
That's on. I do.
It's not on.
What? I'm having the same problem. Green lights going on. It's not.
Mr. D'Angelo, I do understand that item 10J relating to Head Start Policy Council items needs to be amended to change the date of the Policy Council meeting from May 14th to May 21st. They were not able to meet until today.
Okay,
So actually that would be a motion.
yes.
It
Okay,
doesn't have to be separate. The motion can be to approve the consent agenda items 6A through 10K with item 10J amended to change the date to May 21st, 2024.
So you're seeking a motion in that regard.
yeah, so it'll be combining the two. So that's the motion. I want to approve the consent agenda item 6A through 10K with item 10J amended to change the date to May 21st, 2024. Any questions?
Okay, I think you're seeking a first and a second, correct?
Can I get the motion?
So moved.
Ms. Winters,
Second.
Ms. Osecki.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favor? of
Any
6A,
discussion? Any discussion?
Any questions? No?
Yep.
Okay, all those in favor of 6A through 10K? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, we're
Thank you,
now
Ms.
going back to our regular agenda items, which would start off with the presentations of mini reports. And the first will be our special education mini report. Dr. Green?
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone. In your orange folder, there is a copy of this month's special ed mini report, as well as the Word docs to replace settings under item 2A. This month, we have Jen Schmidt, who is going to share an update about our school-age programs that are located in our center-based programs, as well as embedded in district buildings.
Dr. Granny, would you like, oh, I'm sorry. We're good. I didn't mean to interrupt you, sir. My apologies.
Thank you, Dr. Drain. So as Dr. Drain shared, you'll see an overview of our school age classroom programs. Really wanted to take a little time tonight to highlight some of those programs and the partnerships with our districts. We are lucky to be able to partner with all of our districts in offering a range of supports and classrooms embedded within our district buildings. On the second page, you'll see an outline of our current classroom numbers and student enrollments. So this year we have 54 classrooms embedded in our districts and currently within 9 of our school districts. And that allows the opportunity for students to access inclusion, maybe in academics, specials, social opportunities throughout the day. And for students who may be in need of a more supportive environment, we also offer center-based programming. So I know many of you are familiar with our Samuel Everett program, where we offer programming in kindergarten through age 22, in emotional support, autistic support, emotional disability support. Additionally, at Samuel Everett, we have a subacute partial hospitalization program for students ages 8 to 14. And we also offer a hybrid program located in Warminster, which is center-based emotional support programming for students in grades 7 through 12. And throughout the county, we have transition programs for students who are 18 to 22. So they are located at Samuel Everett, as well as 4 community locations. We have our Project Search program at the County of Bucks. We have 2 classrooms located at the Bucks County Community College, one in Percy and one in Bristol. And then we have our WELL program at Percy Square. So on the second page where you see those overviews, we have 18 classrooms at Samuel Everett currently, and we're supporting about 152 students right now, as well as 15 in our partial. We have 28 students at our hybrid program, and then we have our range of Project Search, which typically is around 10 students, 3 classrooms at our WOW program, and then 1 classroom each at the community college. And then in addition to our continuum of classroom-based programs, we also work collaboratively with our districts to support additional requests for school-age programs such as transition services, which may be job coaching, travel training. We provide programming in residential locations such as Bucks County Correctional Facility and the Detention Center, Foundations, Behavioral Health, and then we provide itinerant supports to our districts, such as reading specialists or supportive school psychologists and behavior analysts. So I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of an overview of our current programming, and I know we'll talk about that a little bit more in the future. Thank you.
Good job.
Any questions for you? No? I have a question.
Of course.
So I know now this year,
Mhm.
we're keeping a lot of the kids till they're age 22, right? So can you just talk about how you kind of adapted to that? 'Cause I know that, you know, going into it, I don't think that was like a late breaking change, correct? So how does it affect all these programs?
It was a change at the start of the school year, with the change to age 22. We did work collaboratively again with our districts for any students who may be returning. We were able to offer those, programming and work within the available spaces. And then we've continued to, again, work with each of the LEAs, particularly now in the last week, as we've had some changes into looking at that continuum of age 22, and what that may mean as we move towards the end of the year.
Because it goes back in time, right? I mean, it's not like, hey, just take it for another year, right? I mean, it's, especially the way we run our program. So I appreciate, you explaining that, and I hope the rest of the board understands that,
No, I
That's,
appreciate you
it's
bringing
a
it up.
good thing. It's a really good thing, right? It's needed, but it's not easy to implement, especially across all of these programs. Yes, space limitations, teacher limitations.
Absolutely. I know many of our districts experience that as well. And so it definitely was a change at the start of this year and working particularly with the to 21 or 22 programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Quick question, is it worth, I know what's in the legislative update, but is it worth tying one of it together at the same time with the ruling?
Talking about it now, sir?
Yeah, no, I'm not thinking the whole thing, but that one section.
Oh, sure.
In terms of how that it's stayed now, how long do they think it's gonna be stayed?
Fast forwarding to that portion of the legislative agenda. Yeah, that's a perfect idea. Would you like to do that, Rebecca, from your seat? That's a great idea.
Sure. So Mr. Waldorf is referencing that on Thursday, May 16th, the Commonwealth Court issued a ruling stating that the age out provisions issued by PDE on August 31st of 2023, which required school entities to educate students up to age 22 on their 22nd birthday, they aged out of programs. That was a significant change that was announced last August. There were 6 days to prepare for that. That new ruling went into effect on September 6th. And 3 school districts and the Pennsylvania School Boards Association challenged the rulemaking procedures that PDE used in announcing that new rule. I do want to state that the 3 school districts in PSBA made it very clear in their filings that they were not opposed to providing services to students up to the age of 22. What they were challenging was how the rule was promulgated, or the lack of promulgation procedures by PDE in changing that rule. And last Thursday, May 16th, the Commonwealth Court ruled that they ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, and they said that PDE did not follow the correct rulemaking procedures. There was no notice period, there was no comment period, there was no opportunity for individuals to weigh in before this rule was changed. And so therefore the rule was void and unenforceable. With that order, as of last Thursday, that meant that the ruling returned to what it was on August 30th, 2023. And in that case, what typically was happening was students were served who turned 21 during the school year, continued to receive services, but then graduated at the end of the school year. So you did have students who were age 21, say they had a birthday in October, they still received services through June 15th of the following year. The age 22 rule would allow those students to continue to come back the following year and receive services until they turned age 22 in October. Okay, so that happened on Thursday. And then yesterday, Monday, it all runs together. Yesterday on Monday, PDE announced that they were appealing the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, that Commonwealth Court ruling. With that appeal, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court issued a stay on the Commonwealth Court opinion, which means the age 22 ruling stays in effect. And school districts are obligated to continue to educate students up to their 22nd birthday.
There it is. Yeah.
Can I ask a question on that? Is it you age out on your 22nd birthday, or is it the same where if you turn 22 in October, you stay through June?
No, you age out on the day of your birthday,
The day before.
the day before. So if your birthday is October 15th, the last day you receive services is October 14th.
I see where you're questioning, because to me, I'm glad they're doing it, but what, like, and I know in our district, we had a case where, right, I mean, we had a young man, you started him in school and then he ages out like in October. Well, you know, why wouldn't you just make it 22 to the end of that school year? Because how does the school district budget for that? You know, it's not like you're, you know, like you have to hire special teachers, right? You have to have teachers on staff. So if you have to have them there for a kid for 2 months. And so all I would say was I would hope that who's ever lobbying it would tie it to the coterminous with the end of the school year. I mean, and I don't think it's going to probably end up costing the difference the same amount. So I have to say.
Well, just out of curiosity, since the door was open, what prohibits a school entity from limiting the age to which they choose to teach people?
That law.
I don't know that I understand, like, are you
Okay, so you're saying that they age out
at
at
age,
point.
on the day before their 22nd birthday?
What if the school still decides to allow them to attend, chooses to still educate them?
So I would suggest you check with your solicitor. I believe the school district can do whatever a school district wants to do. However, you have to understand the funding under IDEA for students with special needs would stop at age 22.
That I get, that I understand, but theoretically, nothing prohibits a school entity from continuing to allow a student to come to its buildings and be educated regardless of age.
So those students would no longer be a K through 12 student. They would be an adult student per the terms of how we label students. But certainly if school districts want to offer adult services, they could just recognize the IDEA funding stops. And I don't know, Dr. Greeny, you may know more about that than.
And you could also talk about like the steps the IU has taken through OVR and some of the other firms to support students when they turn 22, et cetera.
Yes, IDEA is the federal law that regulates all of them, and then chapter 14 in the state of Pennsylvania. So as Rebecca had shared, for students considered school age, it would go through the conversation that was discussed. As students work through that process, there are the partnerships with those offices that Dr. Hoffman mentioned, where we try to strengthen the services for that local community. But as far as somebody who is not identified as a student with special needs and wanting to continue through 23 and you don't have a high school diploma, can I continue? That I would recommend, as Rebecca said, checking with your solicitor as to see what that local decision might be like, because there could be other things with child find if somebody is still struggling and district should have known or should have known, and then the statute of limitations to go back. It becomes very complex. So that word.
Yeah, interesting point.
Yeah, that's it.
And just yeah, I was going to just plug one more time for those students that age out of traditional school programs. Yeah, you for the last several years under Dr. Hertwig's leadership, Dr. Graney's leadership, in partnership with all of the divisions here, working to provide adult services, if you will.
Yeah.
So that the continuum of services that we offer doesn't stop at 21 or now 22. It's not a traditional school program like you're thinking of in this question, but it is a continuum of services.
Okay, thank you. Now let's move on to our programs and mini services report. Dr. Holland?
Good evening. It's that time of year to start to summarize the school year, some of the programs of the Program and Services Division. So tonight's report is focused on our student events from this past year. And so in your orange folder, you'll find the mini report in hard copy form. A couple highlights for you. Each of our team members who facilitates or really is the lead for these student events wrote their summary of the year. So we had a variety of events to celebrate from the course of the year. Our Bucks County Student Forum had a very successful year under Ron Rowland's leadership, and you can see some of the highlights there for the participating schools. The Bucks IU Student Art Gallery was featured a couple months ago under Nicole Borland's leadership, so you can see a reminder. I certainly also see the art gallery here in our building on the second floor. We had several events from us with a science focus this year. We added a new event this year called the Invention Convention that we support. And a couple of the events, including that event, the Governor's STEM, and the PA Media and Design Competition, are all events that we facilitate through our IU for our county. And then those students that are the top finalists go on to the state level competition. So that's a great thing to share. So the Invention Convention had a school participate and move on to the competition. We have the Governor's STEM as well, and the PA Media and Design Competition all featured. In fact, right now it's taking place at Dickinson College. We have that event for our finalists who left and who moved on, the 8 projects that qualified for the state competition. So maybe we'll hear some good news tomorrow from those students who are participating. And finally, to wrap up our report, the Reading Olympics, that is probably our biggest footprint of an event where we had a very large number of students participating, approximately 3,000 students across the county. We host multiple events across the county to allow for as many students who are interested in participating from your schools be a part of that competition. It is a very much a collaborative, celebratory type of an event where students are essentially celebrating reading. And so we have, really, that's probably one of my favorite events to talk about, because we had 179 elementary school teams this year, 50 middle school teams, and 23 high school teams participate. And those events wrapped up just at the end of last month. So really exciting to share some of those events with all of you, and we look forward to, we're already in the planning process for next year. And we finish the 1 year up and we start to move on and look at what went well and what we can continue to improve, just facilitate across the county. So any questions?
This report helps with one of the things I always say at my board meeting is I try to explain to them in my IU report that the IU is not just your special needs outlet. And this is an example with reading, especially where we're being told that we just serve 3,000 students, regardless of ability or disability, 2,100 elementary age kids too. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing, I'm glad I have this report that I can present back to them. Again, just rave about what the IU does above and beyond special education. So thank you.
Absolutely. That's part of what the program and services budget essentially provides for, is the ability to offer those events.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna hear from Allison, with our 2024-2025 budget presentation.
Is that ready for him? Attached to the agenda item in board docs is the draft of the 24-25 budget. For those of you who are new to the budget document is about 350 pages of budget detail. Tonight's presentation is intended to share highlights of the document with you. Tonight's item is for informational purposes only, and then at the June meeting, there'll be an item on the agenda to approve the budget. The Bucks County Intermediate Unit is a regional educational service agency providing high-quality, cost-effective programs and services to public and private K-12 schools,
school districts, the early learning and adult communities in Bucks County and beyond. While the Bucks IU may be associated with being a provider of special education services, to Mr. Jackson's point, we are more than that. We also provide professional development, business and technology services, early childhood and adult services. Our mission is always guiding us as well as the development of our budget. You'll see the budget for next year expanding to reflect increased revenue from local, state, and federal sources to support program needs and growth in the programs and services that we offer. The budget development process is a year-long process. This year's budget development began in July of 2023, when we started the initial projections for the 24-25 school year and discussed the goals and objectives. It's important to note that the grants and subsidies that make up our budget often have their own timelines and reporting requirements. The grants and budgets presented in our annual budget are those that we expect to be funded year to year. Many of the grants and subsidies are unknown to us at the time we budget. That is why throughout the year, we present budget revisions for changes and budget approvals for new grants. As mentioned earlier, the mission serves as a guide for the budget development process. In addition, there are many key players in the development of the budget, some of which are illustrated here and include local, state, and federal agencies, as well as school districts and CTCs. So the Bucks IU differs from that of your local school districts in a few areas. First, the IU is not a taxing authority. Revenues are received from a variety of sources to support the services that we offer. Many of the budgets prepared have strict requirements from the funding agencies. Our budget is prepared based on assumptions regarding anticipated funding levels from various state and federal agencies, as well as the anticipated contracts and requests from school districts from both inside and outside of Bucks County. As final allocations, appropriations, or contracts become known, we will present new budgets or budget revisions to the board for approval. This slide shows the number of people supported by the budgets in the budget document. The total is nearly 18,300 people served, which is an increase of over 1,000 people or 8% served since this time last year. Our numbers will fluctuate throughout the year as we strive to meet the needs of the districts or receive additional grant funding to operate programs. This year's budget, or the CAB as we often call it in the business office, includes 33 individual budgets within the General Fund, Special Revenue Fund, and Capital Projects Fund, and total over $231 million, which is an increase of about 9% over last year's budget. The increase over last year's budget reflects additional funding from state and federal agencies, as well as growth in our programs to meet the needs and requests of school districts. As a comparison, when I first started at the IU just over 10 years ago, the budget was $100 million less at $132 million. Since then, the IU has continued to expand and grow to meet the needs of our district and community. The revenue to support the programs comes from several sources, and details can be found in the budget book. Less than half of our revenue comes from local sources like school districts, and the majority of our funding comes from state and federal sources. For next year, we are projecting over $75 million in state funding, which includes over $25 million for early intervention, $21 million for transportation, and $15 million for PSERS and FICA benefits. Federal funding of over $36 million includes funding of almost $23 million for IDEA, $5.7 million for Head Start, and $6 million for the school-based access program. Local funding of $104 million includes $92 million for the purchase of school-age special education services. The remaining local revenue includes the purchase of services in areas such as programs and services and technology services. Other funding includes interfund and intrafund transfers for capital, administrative allocations, and indirect costs. The 33 individual budgets for 24-25 have been summarized here for your review and show a comparison to the 23-24 budget developed at this time last year. The individual programs can be found in detail in the budget document beginning on page 29. To highlight a few of the noteworthy changes, Act 89 funding supporting our non-public schools is increasing almost 11% as a result of additional funding from the state to support students in non-public schools in Bucks County. IDEA programs have increased over 8% as a result of increased federal funding, with a large portion of this increase passing through to your Bucks County school districts. In the special revenue fund, we are anticipating increases associated with significant growth in district requests to meet student needs. The requests for school-age special education services have increased overall. Midway through the current year, enrollments in our classroom programs were 9% higher from our in-county districts compared to the enrollments the districts contracted for at the beginning of the school year. Similarly, enrollments from out-of-county districts in our programs mid-year was nearly 50% higher this year than it was last year at that time. Related service referrals have almost tripled over the past 3 years. The Bucks IU strives to meet the needs of our districts and has increased staffing to support the continued increase in requested services such as speech. Demand from the districts to provide one-on-one paraeducators was double at the mid-year this year compared to what the districts contracted for at the beginning of the year. This is an increase from 32 people to 64 people. In early intervention, funding from the state has increased an additional $2.4 million or 8.7% due to the increase in the number of students and services required in the program. State revenue for transportation has increased as well to support transportation requests that have steadily increased. In the past 3 years, the number of students being transported by the Bucks IU has grown over 70% to about 1,225 students. In just the current year, there's been an increase of over 40% in the number of routes provided by our contracted carriers. We're anticipating the growth seen in many of these programs to continue into next year, and we're planning to expand support in order to meet the requested services from districts. The largest expenditure categories in the budget are salaries and benefits and represent 56% of the budget. Next year's budget supports 1,069 Bucks IU FTEs, which includes increases to support the growth discussed on the previous slides. Staffing details can be found on page 31 of the budget document. In addition to Bucks IU employees, third-party agencies are utilized to provide staffing for programs, and their expenses are found in the professional services line. I hope this information was helpful to better understand the budget plans for next year. Attached to the agenda item in board docs is the 350-page budget book that you can review prior to this being included on the June agenda. Keep in mind, the budget is based on assumptions around the anticipated funding levels and requested services, and any revisions needed based on actual levels will be brought to the board for approval during the 24-25 year. With that, do you have any questions? I'd be happy to answer, or as you have time to review the budget document over the next few weeks, I can certainly address questions then prior to June.
Just one question. The slides talk about 231 million, and then the budget has that, but at the top, it still has a draft of 229 million a couple times. I'm just curious.
So the 229 excludes capital projects. So the 229 is the operational side.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I just, some of those numbers that stand out, like the, that when you say, you know, you met with the districts and you got your staff requirements, then they doubled basically between that, you know, then and now. And, in an environment where there's teacher shortages, aide shortages, bus driver shortages, and it seems like the responsiveness of this organization, because the districts may try to do it themselves, but they usually will come to us when they're in a bind. So you put together a really great budget and in the chopping waters of changing. The other thing that stood out was transportation. It's like a 20% increase year over year. Certainly some of that may have to do with, costs and stuff, but everywhere across the board, we're seeing increases, right, in referrals. And so to be able to manage that really kind of on the fly, you and your team have really done a great job. So I just want to thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
I have a question for you. I'm not sure if you can answer this. Perhaps this is something for Karen, but it's an HR question. We're doing our budget as all school districts are, and staffing is always key. And we have a certain number of staffing levels budgeted for. Aides specifically, I'm not sure people around this table, I think we're like short 20 some aides throughout the district. Can you guys speak to staffing levels, what you have budgeted for, and how many positions are unfilled?
So I can tell you.
Yeah, Karen, we need you to go to the mic with Allison. And if we don't have the data, we can obviously get it as well.
Not sure, Mr. Jackson, I don't have the budget, but I can certainly speak to where we started at the beginning of the year and where we are. We know in the last month or so, we only had 32 paraeducator openings. And in the beginning of the school year, we probably had 100. So we have really, between social media, hiring events, and all of the efforts of referrals and some other different strategies, we've been able to place people in positions. So we're excited about
Right,
that.
but again, similar to the folks in the districts at large, it's difficult to find people for the needs we have.
It is still difficult, and we are doing some other strategies to also retain. Because I do believe that retaining the staff, training, development, onboarding, all of those areas do hopefully make a difference. And we want them to stay with us once we do bring them on as a new hire. So did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I do have a question. This relates to the budget, so back home, they had a budget meeting tonight. And we're looking at staying within the frame of the 5.3%. If I heard you correctly, you are talking about a 9+% increase. How can I justify that back home?
So I think it's important to note that 9% doesn't just mean additional costs associated with increases in expenses. Some of it is associated with additional funding from state and federal agencies, recognizing that we are supporting additional students and therefore they're providing additional funding to hire the staff to provide the services to the students. For example, in the case of EI. Or for the case of transportation, where there's additional state funding to help support the increased services to the students. So part of that number includes the growth to provide more services. And in order to provide more services, we have to hire more staff to do that.
It's still a very difficult thing for me to explain.
Yeah, I think the way that you explain it is that the 9% doesn't necessarily reflect a 9% increase in costs. Our costs are variable based on the program design. Some programs might cost more than 9%, some programs might cost less than 9% increase. But overall, based on the requests for referrals that we have, our budget is growing for the simple fact that we have to pay more people. And when you have to pay more people, you need to increase your budget. You increase your budget by generating more revenue. We're doing that with state and the local and the federal sources, as well as more requests from the school districts. So it's apples to oranges in terms of percentage increase. Your costs in the districts are expanding because of labor, same as here. But you're not necessarily growing. We're growing, which increases the budget because we have to pay more people. So
You're up.
I also think you need to look on year over year. So example, I think our share of the budget at Pennsbury is in the $560 million range, I believe. But our total amount that is increasing is like $167 $100,000. So in terms of we get to look at your individual budget versus considering the whole. And then again, for us, it's a bargain. We're kind of at the break even from the prior year.
Mr. Jackson?
And actually, the simple answer to any question about the IU's budget as it relates to every school district here is you don't have to use it. The IU is a service you choose to use. Now, granted, if you don't use them, you're going to come up with the money and pay your own individuals. But the costs to run this organization are X, and that 9% increase also consider again the extent of what that budget entails. It is not just special needs. There is a host of other things that budget is involved in. So I don't think they can. I guess I could give Allison like a month's job and say, okay, exactly what percentage of that 9.11% is geared towards special education instruction to Mr. Fleming, to Fleming's district versus all the other programs that exist in the IU. And that would be the kind of thing you'd want to take to your board. But again, these are all the variables that you have to make your board understand. 9.5% increase is not just immediately translated into a 9.11% increase to your district.
When Alice and I spoke earlier today, this is one of the points we wanted to drive home. So Fleming, I'm telling you, that was the perfect question to ask, because it's an important point that we actually spoke about, making sure that we spoke about that our budget increases isn't necessarily an increase in expenditure to you. It's an increase in the amount of services that we're providing as a major part of the increase. So, Mr. Walden.
Well, thanks again for the report today about programs like Reading Olympics. But if you listen to the next segue to the executive director report, you're going to see all the programs every month that are cooperative, that our different department heads are able to participate in, our superintendents once a month is included. So there's a lot of services that are being provided throughout the year to our administrations. We're invited to all kinds of programs, like some are starting at 7:30 morning, hard to get to, but and so I just want to point those things out to you, that if you start paying attention to Mark's presentation and read the activity, it's well worthwhile. I do want to we have two different budgets here throughout the year. One is the administration, running the administration, and again, we all share proportionally that part.
That's actually included in this budget, sir. What you're referring to is Dr. Holler's programs and services budget. Yes.
I'm just saying we do two things. And so this part of the budget, I believe, are our individual programs. So they give us a checklist of programs based on and we fill that out based on our students. And we make a determination whether we can bring it in-house, and one of our school districts are making an effort to do that because there's a slight premium, but to do it to outsource the work. But the reality is that is Ron said, is part of the budget are things that we decided we want to take advantage of. And so again, I would encourage you to look at your individual budget versus necessarily the overall. It's an answer to your board.
I get,
you know the answer.
I get it all, but I have 8 other board members that's, looking at that number, and they are the ones that's going to be very hard to convince. So that's where my problem is. I have worked, with this organization for a number of years.
A few.
I know the process.
Remind everyone, 39 years with the IU, sir?
Yes, it was.
Yes, sir. So any support that we can provide to help differentiate an increase to our operational budget compared to an increase in the expenses for special education services that's Centennial's contract, very easy for us to help differentiate the two. I think a growing IU budget is a good thing. It represents growth in the organization. It represents response to demand. I'm not suggesting that if it constricts a little bit, that's not a good thing. That could be just a reaction to the market. But right now, the market is speaking that there's a demand for our services and we're responding. And so the budget increases accordingly.
Anybody else?
Great conversation. We couldn't have planned that question any better. It's perfect.
And just to close it out, right? I mean, I think it's important to state one thing that's really obvious. Any percent increase in the IU budget is totally disconnected to your budget unless you're getting a bill from us increasing it by that amount. But actually, as Dr. Hawkins says, that growth is really revenue growth in response to providing more services. So in some kind of a weird way, your administration that's spending the money, that they've got salaries and health benefits every year that almost are gonna eat up the 5% that you're allowed to raise your taxes under the law. So I would just tell, if anybody says, well, what's going on? You're not paying 9% more to the IU. You could actually be paying less.
Or more if they're asking for more
Yeah.
services.
Yes, yes. So,
Yeah, you definitely want to get a report from your Director of Pupil Services and find out what your population being served in IU classrooms is. It's likely it's gone up significantly over the years as well.
Right, in different programs, the program rate is variable. The team here, Dr. Graney's team, Allison's team, they work very hard to make sure that the programs are right-sized through program design. And so a program might cost more next year than it does this year by a factor of 9% or greater. But that's in reflection to the needs of the students that we're serving. And that's all done transparently and with full collaboration, cooperation, and in some cases at the requests of the districts that refer the students. So, everything should reflect what the actual cost is.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the executive director's report.
At your seats, you have beautiful blue t-shirts to supplement your IU wardrobe. So I hope to see you out and about. Mr. D'Angelo, I think you've already been spotted several times.
I have.
Yes, sir. Also, newly arrived today, you are, I think, maybe the first to get these. I got these from my executive assistant just before the board meeting. IU magnets. So put that on your car or wherever, any metal, right? And then also some stickers. We'll be distributing these to our team as well. But you are the first, given the timing of their arrival. So those are beautiful. Kudos to our marketing team for putting those together. The e-news, you get if you subscribe to our social media channels and networks, and if you are receiving our emails and our Facebook posts and our LinkedIn blasts. If you're not, I encourage you to follow us. This is really a compilation of all the great things that we've done in the last 30 days. You'll see the Fab Lab Brunch and Learn that you were invited to, advocacy efforts on Capitol Hill. You'll see some faces that you recognize. You'll see district superintendents, as well as team members from the Bucks County Intermediate Unit that Rebecca facilitated. A wonderful day advocating for public education, not just the school districts, but also the CTCs, as well as the Intermediate Unit, of course. We had a prom not that long ago. It was a beautiful night in Paris, but in Bucks County, in Doylestown. We talk about our work-based learning communities, the reading challenges going on at Samuel Everett, inclusiveness in school projects, some really great things happening in Bristol Township to support students with hearing disabilities. Spring is a busy time for recognizing members of the IU team. So you see it's ASL Day, it's Occupational Therapy Month, it's Earth Day, it's Administrative Professionals Day, Teacher Appreciation Day, National Foster Care Month, Speech and Language Hearing, Nursing Week, Mental Health Awareness, and School Communications. A lot to celebrate. And so we take our time to make sure that we celebrate all of those eclectic and diverse job categories that we are very proud to employ, most of which are supporting your students. There's the PA Seed ecosystem, which is an acronym that represents things that are happening in the STEAM environment. Dr. Holler talked about some of those things. Some professional development with Dr. DeSico, safety first, some things that we're doing with the I Love You Guys Foundation, which is actually a protocol that your districts are now trained in through this organization. In the event that a school needs to be evacuated, how do you reunify students with their guardians? So there's a lot of protocols that go with that. The importance of outdoor play, more Monday moments, our ambassadors. Dr. Graney coordinated a visit from our friends and colleagues and partners at the Department of Education, Bureau of Special Education. They visited various IU programs around Bucks County and were very impressed with what they saw. It was nice to debrief with them. Thank you, Lenny, for organizing that. Pre-K counts teachers doing some great things. Our front desk reception areas, you guys know Dean. If you come here during the day, then you know Ann. There's a great photo of those two. They work well together. And in many cases, they are the first and perhaps only person that someone from the public might interact with that works for the IU, and they're both great ambassadors. We've got art and education. You see some wonderful things at the Youth Center, where the IU provides educational support. Our amazing art program, Kayla Gerst put together a beautiful mural, and you can actually see a picture of the mural. That sunrise is actually a mural painted on a wall in the Youth Center. Beautiful. Our sequel program, which supports adults, was actually involved in a play that they produced, wrote, and performed at Music Mountain Theater across the bridge. Some great things with our programs and services division with artificial intelligence. That's hot right now. We're supporting our school districts with that. Best wishes to retiring OTs, PTs, et cetera. Is there any SLPs? No, just the occupational therapists and physical therapists. That's right. We've just completed 2 superintendent searches, Dr. Doster, Dr. Yanni in the Morrisville and Central Bucks communities. So we always do community forums, and we thank those 2 school districts for trusting us to facilitate that process. And last week, Mr. D'Angelo and Ms. Foley were here to celebrate our Caring Award recipients. There's some things on the back about ESY, the Summer Fab Lab camps, and lots going on. And again, I remind you, this is just what's happened in the last 30 days. So lots of great things to help you present to your boards when you talk about, to Mr. Jackson's point, what's going on at the IU. Also, I'm pleased to share with you that Sophia is our intern of the month from our Project Search team. You know, you were all invited to the upcoming banquet. If you intend to come to that and you haven't let me know, please let me know tonight. But I always like to read a sentence for here about our interns from Project Search, which you know is co-located with the county. I'm going to read the last sentence of the first paragraph. For residents and staff at the Manor, meaning the Chamonix Manor, a day spent with Sophia is a day spent well, full of overwhelming positivity and helpfulness as she brightens the day of the county's most important residents. I love that. And then you can read more about that as well. There are 2 press releases, which I've sent to you electronically, but just so that you have them, about our Parisian themed prom, and then also our Employability Expo, which recently occurred, supporting young adults as they transition to adulthood with practice and preparedness in getting ready for the workforce. There's an interesting article I included for you, written by Dr. George Robb. Now, why am I mentioning this? A retired administrator from the intermediate unit named Jim LaJudas, he was a longtime member of our programs and services team, was doing some unrelated research at the Mercer Library, and he came across a magazine called Bucks County Life, and he was flipping through edition March 1967, which is in their archives. And in there was a 1-page spread written by Dr. Robb, who was the last county superintendent for Bucks and the first executive director of the intermediate unit. So he was in the seat when the county superintendent became the executive director of the intermediate unit. And here he is in an article in 1967 foreshadowing to Bucks County in this magazine the pending change, which would inevitably take place in 1970-71, all about the need for an intermediate unit, to serve as a liaison and a buffer between the districts and the departments of education at the state and local level, as well as amongst themselves, as well as to be responsive to local needs and to develop services that meet those needs in a cost-effective, efficient way. All of that reflected in everything we talk about here every month and captured very succinctly, very articulately in that budget. I don't think he ever would have imagined, not to speak for him, in 1967 that we'd be serving 18,000, 19,000, or if you include the Reading Olympics kids of 3,000, 20,000+ kids in any given school year. So how we have grown, but if you read it, you'll see that the mission really isn't that much different than they envisioned in the 60s when they wrote the legislation that created us. Michelle has included directions for logging into board docs slightly differently next month, which we'll also attach in an email to you next month. I want to also acknowledge Dr. Jen Hertwig for her official approval ratification by board vote tonight, transitioning from Director of Program Development to Assistant to the Executive Director for Operations. Congratulations, Dr. Hertwig, on your appointment. I want to thank soon to be Dr. Whartonby. I didn't mean to jinx you there, but Robert's been serving as acting interim supervisor of safety. We've recently posted that job in the event that that gets filled before the next meeting. Thank you, Robert, for stepping in and supporting our IU. In addition to your busy obligation as supervisor procurement. Thank you, sir, for that. I wanted to also just share a couple other quick things. I want to thank our tech division and our facilities department for getting these rooms ready for us quickly after work days. Thank you, facilities. Thank you, technology. And thank you, Bradley, Dan, and Cece for the innovations and improvements on the streaming over the last several months. It's a marked notable improvement. I want to thank you both and make sure that the board recognizes it as well. So thank you for all that you're doing each and every month. And there's Dan giving Brad. Thank you, Bradley. One final reminder at the request of Mr. Morgan, Chair of the Nominations Committee. You'll recall that your districts, of course, reorganize in December for a January start. The IU runs on a different cycle. We reorganize in June for a July 1 through June 30 reorganization. And so the officers are elected in June each month for a July 1 through June 30 term. Mr. Morgan, in consultation with conversations with the other members of the nomination committee, would like to bring forward a motion next month for your consideration that would maintain Mr. D'Angelo and Mr. Jackson in their current roles. I wanted to just present that on his behalf. It's not up for vote tonight. You've already voted tonight, but you will see a motion to that effect at the recommendation of the nominations committee next month. And again, I'm sharing that on behalf of Mr. Morgan. If anyone has any concerns or would like to nominate themselves or someone else, you can still do that, but I would encourage you to talk to Mr. Morgan directly. So congratulations to the two of you. I don't mean to be premature in my congratulations, but for garnering the nominations one more time, and you'll see, absent any additional change, your names on the agendas next month to continue in your seats as president, vice president. That concludes my report, sir.
Well, thank you. I just got one criticism. You go through this too fast.
That's true.
You're gonna watch, but there's so many great things in here. And including that prom, which was off the charts, really a great event. I just have one question for Dr. Hall. Earlier today I was signing a contract. Something is going on at the Fab Lab. Some kind of immersion, can you explain that to us?
Sure. So thank you for approving this evening the immersive reality room that we will be working on getting up and running at our Fab Lab Center. That is really a virtual reality type of experience for students. And just a couple examples, just to give you a taste of what's to come or what that might look like. If students are studying a different subtopics about environmental impacts or the environment, as one example, they might get immersed into Yellowstone and see that firsthand by being in the virtual reality room, seeing that in the immersive reality room, seeing that in process right in front of them. Another example is we're hoping to take students to the Delaware River through our partnerships with our districts, and certainly with we have an Environmental Literacy Institute next month. And so as an example, students might take pictures of parts of the Delaware River and then maybe take those pictures one year and then the next year take those pictures again, be able to immerse themselves in the room and start to notice changes. So that whether it's perhaps there's some erosion going on or the kind of thing that they might notice, that's an example of just really being able to use that room and apply that environmental awareness or environmental literacy to the new standards that we have, but also experiencing it firsthand. And just a non-STEM or STEAM related that certainly might be interesting is, as you know, one topic in social studies that students study in 4th grade is Pennsylvania, right? So as one example, perhaps they might be able to immerse themselves in Gettysburg, right? And see that firsthand by being a part of that virtual reality if they can't get there in person. So just a couple examples, but I'm sure we will have more as we get that room up and running in the coming months.
Dr. Holler, are you a Trekkie? Did you ever see The Next Generation with the holodeck?
Yes.
Is that what this is like, right? You like sort of go in and it's almost like you're there.
Yes, that's the whole reason.
You have goggles on, right?
The idea is that you're really feeling like you're right there walking in the moment in wherever location it might do it. So yeah.
I think I just revealed myself as a Trekkie, but that's okay. I like The Next Generation. I thought that was a great show. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, and that kind of correlates with the very first thing about the brunch and learn that we had at the Fab Lab.
Yes, sir.
And we're appreciative. And again, that's tying in with the budget. That's another program that is growing, right? The budget for that is
Yeah, that didn't exist 10 years ago, and that's a straight entrepreneurial budget at this point. So that only exists because of the entrepreneurial nature of that program and that division. I mean, in fact, that entire budget that you looked at tonight is entirely entrepreneurial across the board.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on, we're going to go to our executive, our legislative report, Rebecca.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'll try to make it a quick report. On page 1, I give you a little update on budget discussions. So the fiscal year is 6 weeks away, July 1, right, 2024. and state budget discussions are starting to heat up. Last week, GOP leaders in the Senate moved forward with two bills described, and I will describe them to you, that sent a really strong message about where the negotiation process is. So the first bill is Senate Bill 269, the personal income tax reduction measure. This bill would cut the state's personal income tax from 3.07% to 2.8%. And then it would also eliminate the gross receipts tax on utility bills effective January 1, 2025. So these two sections of this bill combined would reduce general fund revenues by more than $7 billion over 3 years. Republican leaders, however, stated they were introducing this measure because they wanted to make sure that their caucus is committed to moving tax cuts forward. And that any investments in additional spending should also be investments back to Pennsylvania taxpayers. This measure was approved by the full Senate by a vote of 36-14 on May 7th, and it's now been sent to the House for consideration. However, the House Democrats have said that they will not take up this bill. And so it's clear that this is a bill that's being staked out as part of the bargaining position for tax cuts, as part of what's going to be included in a final budget, in the budget talks. The second bill that was introduced, well, it wasn't introduced because it was already been introduced, but what moved forward unexpectedly, very quickly, was Senate Bill 795, which is the Pennsylvania Award for Student Success, the PASS scholarship program. This measure, again, moved forward very unexpectedly. It would create a scholarship program targeting students in the lowest 15% of performing schools in the state as eligible for this PASS award. Awards are $5,000 for grades K through 9, $10,000 for 9 through 12, and $15,000 for students with individual education plan. These awards would allow students and families in the lowest 15% performing schools to be able to take that money and go to a private school, a charter school. So this bill was reported on the Senate Education Committee as amended, as I described, on May 7, along a mainly party line vote of 8-3. However, Senator Anthony Williams, a Democrat from Philadelphia, crossed party lines, and he was the only Democrat to support the measure. This bill is likely to be taken up by the full Senate when the chamber returns in June. In response to those two measures from the Senate, the House Democrats then last week said that they too were going to introduce a bill. We don't have a bill number yet, but their bill is essentially a restatement of what the governor asked for in terms of education, additional funding for education. So they are calling this the Adequacy and Tax Equity Supplement Bill. It would be adequacy and tax equity for over 7 years that would go directly to public school districts. It would funnel an additional $5.1 billion to 371 school districts facing adequacy gaps, as recommended by the Basic Education Funding Commission report issued earlier this year. For those of you who are following me, I'm on page 2. So a memo was signed by 3 House Democrats who were part of that bipartisan funding commission. And that memo was also co-signed by House Democratic leaders, Speaker Joanne McClinton, and it also offered that $1 billion would be distributed over 7 years to school districts to make sure that schools are adequately funded in the state. This legislation also would codify changes in how state funds cyber charter schools, capping the tuition that school districts would pay to cyber charters to $8,000 for each student attending. So what I'm laying out for you is with the introduction of Senate Bill 269, the approval of Senate Bill 795 on the Senate side, and then the response from the House Democrats, we can see what these conversations are going to be like as our legislators try to approve a budget. So if you look at the legislative schedule, which is in the middle of page 2, really the action is going to occur next month. Both the House and Senate are in session almost every day in June, and that's when all of these discussions will occur. It's too early to predict whether we'll have a budget agreement by June 30th. However, having talked to several of our Bucks County legislators, they're advising they don't think that's going to happen, and they are already committed to stays in Harrisburg through at least the first 2 weeks in July. So stay tuned. We'll see if we make the June 30th budget deadline and when we do get a budget. So while you have those discussions going on over what the budget may be and what those conversations are going to be like, both chambers have really increased their activity in pieces of legislation to include an omnibus school code bill, which usually accompanies the budget bill. And I just gave you a couple of pieces of legislation that moved forward last week that more than likely, based upon strong support, will be included in the omnibus school code bill. The first one is House Bill 1097, which is 9/11 Remembrance in Schools. There would be a day on 9/11 that schools would be required to have a moment of silence. And PDE also would be required to approve curriculum that could be offered that day. This measure passed by a vote of 203 to nothing. It was sent to the Senate Education Committee. It was unanimously approved out of that committee, and it's expected that the Senate will approve this measure when they return in June. So I would expect that language to be a part of any final school code bill. Regarding the House acted on the following measures that would also likely be included in the final omnibus school code bill. Menstrual hygiene products accessibility grant program, also student mental health awareness and mental health training. These are very much not controversial. Protecting the mental health of young users on social media platforms. That's House Bill 2017, and that was introduced by Representative Brian Monroe from Bucks County. So these are all bills that we're flagging that we're watching. And more to come in June, right? Over on page 4 is a conversation about the Commonwealth Court case. So we've already had that conversation, and I'm just going to skip that part. And I'll move over to page 5, which is just a reminder. I think everyone here is aware, but I just wanted to include a couple of paragraphs. On April 19th, the U.S. Department of Education released new Title IX regulations. These regulations go into effect on August 1, 2024. They expand the definitions of sex discrimination and sexual harassment under Title IX. They include sexual orientation, gender identity, and pregnancy as protected classes under Title IX. They also include increased privacy rights. They include increased obligations to train employees and school staff, for resolution of complaints, expanded reporting requirements, and increased efforts on supportive measures. So your school Title IX coordinators should sign up for trainings now, so they are prepared to understand these new regulations as quickly as possible by August 1. And then likewise, school solicitors should be consulted to review any current Title IX policies to make sure that they are in conformity with the new regulations. And that's my report. Any questions?
Rebecca, can you just kind of update us on, so the state of the House, it's one vote difference, right?
That's correct.
Pennsylvania, and the Senate is,
I think it's 30, it's like 2/3 to 1/3.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and just another thing, so on this proposal, where they're saying they're capping tuition in school district, pay cyber charters to $8,000, that, you know, I mean, I know for Bristol, we have maybe like 30 kids, so I think right now we're paying like 12 or 13,000. Isn't that, is anyone familiar with that number?
You want to talk about what they pay?
Sure. Actually, it varies by school district, because right now the law says you pay what your per pupil cost is for your district. So what your per pupil cost is in Bristol Borough may be different than what it is in Centennial or Pennsbury. Some districts have significant per pupil cost of $20,000 or $30,000. This $8,000 is would really be very favorable. It would be a great relief to a number of school districts across the Commonwealth. keep in mind, Governor Shapiro in his budget put the figure of 10,000. The House Democrats are introducing 8,000, so we'll see. We'll see.
Even at 10,000, I mean, for the bigger districts, it could be millions of dollars, millions, but, so that's a good thing, I think, and, there was a few other things I was looking at. So you also mentioned about the fair funding formula that they're
Right.
trying to get to. So you're saying there's a proposal to add 5.1 billion to basically 2/3 of the districts, right?
Mhm.
And that would be over 7 years, right? Is that what this is proposing?
That's correct.
Okay.
But that's one proposal. There's the opposition has its own funding proposal.
That's correct. These are gonna be the conversations behind, they're usually behind closed doors as, the Democratic leaders and the the Democrats and Republicans in both the House and Senate, the leadership of both parties get together and try to work out a budget with the governor. So we'll see what happens. And well, Mr. D'Angelo, Mr. Jackson, you've been around several years. You know, it's always June, there's a lot happening. Things happen late at night, you get wind of it, the next day, you wait a couple of days to understand the language. So there will be a lot that goes on in June. And we'll be following it and updating you as we become aware.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, where are we at now?
Executive session, item 12.
Yes, we already spoke about that.
Yes, sir.
Any old business? None, I'll take that as a no. And any new business?
We have one item regarding the standing item that occurs each year regarding the School Boards Association Delegate Assembly Voting Representative. Michelle or Rebecca, do you want to speak to that?
So,
Microphone.
we
Not on.
we can,
Hang on one second. We're going to defer. I'm just going to unplug.
So the annual PSBA Delegate Assembly is held every year. And it's a hybrid event this year, so you can attend in person or virtually and the in-person attendance is only for the first 120 delegates that choose that option when registering. So we can appoint a member of the Bucks IU voting delegate to be there as a representative. If you could let me know by July 3rd, if you were interested in doing that, so that way we can submit that by the August date. But you cannot be a member of a voting delegate from the Bucks IU and from your sending district.
Yeah, that often comes up. Folks say, I'm going to represent my district and I just represent the IU. And technically you can do that, but you can't vote twice. You can only vote for your district or for the IU. So, I mean, obviously you're going to be in the room. You can represent the interests of both organizations, but you can only cast one vote.
Correct. So anybody interested, please let me know by July 3rd.
And we cover the expenses for travel, et cetera, if you want to attend on behalf of the IU. And of course, you can attend virtually. Right?
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
I just want to add one other thing. If you drove in today, you noticed there was an addition to the road that leads to the IU. Did you see the flags? So kudos to human resources, marketing, and facilities. And anybody else that I'm forgetting. When you list people, you run the risk of forgetting somebody, but definitely human resources because they're recruiting tools to let people know we're hiring. Definitely marketing because Robin designed them, I'm sure. Pete, I know you had to get the permits and probably planted them in the ground yourself, sir. So group effort, they're beautiful, they're high quality, and hopefully they, when people drive by, they're curious what the IU is if they've never been here. It's got our website and it advertises to everyone's point today that we're hiring.
Question is, can we make an effort to go paperless? This seems very useful to me to be handing out.
Yeah.
These orange forms and I'll take them home and never using them. I don't know if we can make a move towards that, but if anyone else cares. We also have a lot of plastic.
So we have water filling stations.
Reusable, so just move towards that as a board. I don't know if that's on this
Absolutely. So we have water filling stations. If you want to bring your own carafes, if you'd like us to provide them for you, that's absolutely fine. So anyone who doesn't use the water bottles, they're right outside the store actually. And in other parts of the building, you can literally stick it in there. It'll fill your filtered water, to your point. And then any board member that doesn't want printed copies, we can do it on an at request basis. Mr. Water, we will not print for you, sir. If that's your request, anybody that also doesn't want it printed, just let us know. We'll assume that you want it printed simply for the fact that a lot of folks like to take notes and or they like to bring it with them to their local board meeting to refer when they speak. So we'll just make it differentiated. If you don't want it, let us know. Otherwise, we'll assume you do want it. And if you'd like to return your orange folders, absolutely bring them back. Say again?
Arguing the opposite.
Say again.
Say no, and if you need it, so I'm just saying, I'm encouraging you to move towards going paperless. Your space is saying you opt out, versus I'm saying.
You know, I guess I'm suggesting it that way so that folks don't get here and say, I need it printed, then we have to scramble to print them. I think maybe it'll take 3 months for us to figure out who wants them printed and who doesn't.
I didn't say do it now. I said.
Yeah.
Move towards it. I think that's fine. Encouraged.
Yeah, I guess I was trying to speed it up. So if anybody doesn't want these printed anymore, let Michelle know. Thank you.
Okay, for our second public participation. No one came in, huh? Okay. All right, our next meeting notice, we will be here on Tuesday, June 18th, 2024.
Yes, sir.
And with that, could I get a motion to adjourn? Motion second?